Okay, here we are with our Algebra B Unit 7 test review. These are the 9 test topics that you will have on this individual test. This information has already been disseminated. However, we will not be going over all 9 of these. We have gone over some in class, but today's selection will be just a few of the most important pieces: exponential word problems, exponential web, solving multivariable equations, systems of equations, word problem, properties of exponents, and finally investigating functions. All right, so we're going to get started here with exponential word problems first. So we begin with the exponential word problem. And that problem is, write an exponential equation for the situation below, then answer the corresponding questions. The population of a country was 2.2 million in the year 2010. If the population has been increasing by 1.5% per year, write an equation to represent this growth. Write an equation, and specifically, it's exponential. We know that because it's growing by 1% each year. Okay? That's what tells us it's exponential. So we're looking at y equals a times b to the x. Remember that a is your initial value, and b is your multiplier, which comes from the percent. So how do we determine those? Well, first of all, the initial value typically is given to you. In this case, 2.2 million. Now, the multiplier, we have to do a little bit of work. It's 1.5% per year, and it's increasing. Therefore, you should have this in your toolkit. Percent increase is 1 plus the percent divided by 100. So we just plug that in here. 1 plus 1.5 divided by 100. And that will give us our multiplier. Now, you can leave it like that, or you can reduce it or simplify it by doing 1 plus 1.5 divided by 100. And that will give you an actual decimal value, 1.015. So either answer here would be acceptable. So 2.2, remember that's in millions, 1.015 to the x power. What will the population be in 2015? Well, 2015 is 5 years later. So we substitute 5 for x, so y equals 2.2, 1.015 to the 5th power. You're going to need a calculator for that. So we have 2.2 and then 1.015. Make sure you use the caret key, okay, and that's to the 5th power. So our population is going to be 2.37, but remember that that is 2.37 million people. Okay, 2.37 million people. What was the population in 2000? That means we're going backwards in time, so we would need to substitute a negative 10, because 2000 is 10 years before 2010, to determine what the population was in 2000. So same process, 2.2, 1.015, and now we're going to the negative 10th power. Now all this is assuming that this population grows in this fashion, okay, all the time. And it looks like 1.895 or 896, so we'll just call that 1.9 million. If we round that to 2 decimal places, 1.9 million in 2000. So you'll have to do a problem like that on tomorrow's test. Next, we're looking at exponential web. So this is where I give you some information, but not all, and you need to determine the rest of that information. All right, so what I've given you is 2 values from a table. I've given you 1 and 4, okay, and they are 8 and 64. We need to get the graph, the situation, and the equation. Okay, so it doesn't matter what order you do those in. Probably completing the equation, the table first will make, determining the graph and the graph and the situation much easier. So to get the equation, remember we're talking about y equals a b to the x, but we don't have a or b. Okay, so what we need to determine here is, first of all, how much passed between 64 and 8, okay? And then how much passed between 4 and 1, and since it's exponential, we're going to take the root of that. Okay, so 64 divided by 8, because we're talking about multipliers, equals 8. And then 4 minus 1 is 3, so that means we're going to take the third root of 8. So the cube root of 8 equals 2. And that tells us our multiplier. So our multiplier will be times 2, which is 16, times 2, which is 32, and then divide by 2 to go backwards, which is 4. Okay, so again, I did 64 divided by 8, because those are my y values. y2 divided by y1. And then I did x2 minus x1. And then I took that root of that answer, the third root of that answer. That's a button on your calculator, third root. I can plot my points, or I could write my equation y equals 2. Y equals 4, initial value, times 2 to the x. Plot my points, 0, 4, 1, 8. And that's all I'm going to be able to get on this graph. All right, but my curve should look something like this, roughly. It has a horizontal asymptote at 0. And the situation can be anything that starts at 4 and doubles. Okay, so let's see here. How about Jared had 4 pet rabbits. They doubled each year. So those 4 rabbits, had 4 babies, and they had 8 rabbits the next year, and then those 8 doubled to get 16, and so forth. So Jared has lots of rabbits. There we go. Mainly because he's a magician and he needs them to pull them out of his hat. Next, solving multivariable equations. So that means multivariable means more than one variable, but we're only solving for the x. So we get x by itself. That means there will be a y in our answer. Okay, so first step is to distribute that 4. So we'll have 8x equals 8 plus 4x minus 4y. Now we're trying to get the x by itself, which means you want to get all the x's on same side of the equal sign. Now it doesn't matter which direction you move them, but I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides because I have less over there. So 8x minus 4x is 4x equals 8. That comes down. That made a 0 minus 4y. Then to get the x by itself, I need to divide by 4. Remember to divide both of these by 4. So I end up getting x equals 2 minus y. Best answer. X is by itself. I know there's not a numerical answer, but that's because we had 2 variables in the initial equation. Systems of equations, word problem. Solve the following by writing a system of equations and solving algebraically. It will be specific. You're going to have to write the system and use algebraic steps. Guess and check will not get you full credit. So Dallas bought 5 CDs and 2 DVDs at the flea market for $90.50. So if I'm writing that equation, he bought 5 CDs and 2 DVDs for a total of $90.50. His friend Tex bought 2 CDs and 3 DVDs for a total of $67. What was the price per CD and DVD at the flea market? Well, unfortunately, this is not set up for substitution. It is not set up for equal values. It is best set up for elimination. Now, you can still use any of those other methods. It will just involve more work. Now, what variable are we going to eliminate? That's entirely up to you. We can eliminate C or D. This is going to involve some math, though, because neither of these work out, okay, that we can multiply one or the other. We're going to have to multiply both. All right, so what I would do is multiply the top equation by 2 and the bottom equation by -5. Just remember that we got to distribute everywhere. So 2 times 5c is 10c plus 2 times 2d is 4d equals $90.50 is going to come out to be $181. And then we have -5 times 2c is -10c. -5 times 3d is -15d. And then this one might be tricky. -5 times $67. Let's see here. That's going to be 0, 0, 5, carry the 3, -$335, I believe. Might want to check my math on that. Add them together. So 10c and -10c make a 0. That's what we want. Negative 15 and 4 make negative 11d equals, okay, now we have, the negative 335, okay, and a positive 181. You just got to make sure that you keep your signs here the way they need to be. So we should get, I think, $154. Let me just double check this to make sure, because it doesn't seem like it's coming out the way I want it. So let's see here. First of all, let's check my previous work. Always be sure here. Never try to use, pretend that we're smarter than what we are. Negative 335, perfect. Okay, and then what if I take that plus 181? All right, I get negative 154. Good job. Okay, and let me just double check the 9050 times 2 to make sure that's 181. All right, so we're all set up here. This should be negative 154. Divide by negative 11. Divide by negative 11. Okay, so divided by negative 11. Whoops. It's negative 154. Divided by negative 11. And I find out that the DVD cost $14. Now, to determine the price of the CD, I would take that $14 and substitute it back into either equation. So 5C equals 2 times 14, which equals, plus 2 times 14 equals $90.50. So 5C plus 28 equals 90.50. Subtract the 28 from both sides. So 5C is going to equal 62.50. Divide by 5, divide by 5. So the price of a CD ends up being $12.50. Now, to finish off an equation or a problem like that, you might want to write maybe a sentence saying that the cost of a DVD is $14 while the cost of a CD is $12.50. The next problem here is properties of exponents. There are a lot of properties of exponents that are eligible here. We're going to do 2 quick examples that involve some situations. First of all, this one here involves positive and negative exponents. Anytime you have a negative exponent, it flips it to either the top or bottom, away from where it was. So I'm going to move this x to the negative first to the top. If it doesn't have a negative exponent, it stays where it's at. So the 4x stays where it's at. Okay, however, the x to the negative first moves to the top and becomes positive. So I have another x up there. Okay? This y squared here stays where it's at, so it stays on the bottom. However, this y to the negative second moves to the bottom, so I end up with another y squared on the bottom, and then I just simplify what I have. So my final answer here is going to be 4x squared, because I have 2 x's, over y to the 4th, because I have 4 y's. So similar problem, now we have parentheses, so eliminate those first by distributing that 2 to both of those. So we'll end up with x to the negative 4th y squared over 2x y squared. Then we want to move our negatives. So we have negative 4x's on top, move them to the bottom. Everything else stays stationary. All right, so nothing else changes there. So I'm going to have y squared on top, and then I'm going to have 2x y squared on the bottom, plus now I have an x to the 4th. And then I want to try to simplify the best that I can. So this x to the first and this x to the 4th can combine to make 5x's. The y squared on top and the y squared on the bottom actually cancel each other out. So we end up with 1 over 2x to the 5th. Just remember that 1 is still there. There's a 1 in front of this y squared even though we don't write it. The tendency would be to put a 0 there, and 0 divided by anything is 0, so that would be incorrect. You need to have a placeholder. Last, investigating functions. Investigate the function, let's see here, absolute value of x plus 4 minus 5. Now you can use the graphing calculator for this to get your table and such, and your intercepts and everything if you want to, or you could do it by hand. The tricky part about doing it by hand is that an absolute value graph is a V shape, so we got to make sure we get enough values on both sides of the vertex. Okay, so sometimes it's easier just to resort to the calculator here. So let me show you how to type this in. And if you don't know how to type it in on the test, you can ask. So y equals math number absolute value x plus 4 Okay, minus 5. And then I can go ahead and hit graph. And that'll give me my standard window. I can go to my table and get some values to plug in. But when I do that, I want to try to find the middle of it. And it looks like here, where x is -4, y is -5, is where that middle point ends up being. So I want to focus around that for my table. All right, now again, that's not a requirement, but it's just a suggestion. Okay, so if I'm plotting this, it's going to be to the left 4, down 5. And then there's no stretch, so it just goes up 1 over 1 each time, which will help me find my intercepts and a whole bunch of other things. So that's my graph. That's part of an investigation. The table would be part of an investigation. So x, y. Let's see here, -6. -6 plus 4 is -2. That's 2. Minus 5 is -3. -5 would be -4. -4 would be -5, and then it comes back up from there. -3, -4, -2, -3. You don't have to choose those values. They're the ones I chose because they start in the center and go both directions. Okay, this graph has x-intercepts. Not sure how that happened. Has x-intercepts, and those x-intercepts can be found by using the graph. They end up being whole numbered values. So we have 1, 0, and let's see here. Is that -9, 0? Okay. Y-intercept, again, can be observed from the graph right here. 0, -1. Vertex will be the lowest or highest point on the graph. -4, -5. Domain would be all the x values you can plug in, so that goes on forever, which is -infinity. That goes on forever, which is +infinity. So the domain will be -infinity to x to +infinity. The range would be a little bit different because the graph only goes down to this value here and then back up. So that's -5. It does equal that. Y. And then these arrows mean it goes up forever, so infinity. The graphing calculator graphed it, so it is a function. Okay. And it's an absolute value. Description would be a V shape. Opens up. Our two descriptors there. Otherwise, as far as the investigation is concerned, we have briefly talked about asymptotes, ha and va, but not in great detail. This has neither of them. Not applicable. All right, and I believe that's just about it. So those are the questions that are going to be on tomorrow's test. It would be in your best interest to study and make sure that you come prepared for this first test in Algebra B. Thanks for your time.